Hey guys, it's Smifu. So today I'm bringing you a video talking about the best ways possible to increase your damage output, whether that's on a spirit hero or a gun damage hero. I'm going to cover certain important topics like the way that resistances stack and the way that resist shredders stack as well, to give you every single piece of information you might possibly need to get your DPS through the roof. I would stick around and watch the entire video, as there are definitely some very common misunderstandings that lead to people buying the wrong items, or let's say worse items, for increasing their damage output, especially when it comes to the late game. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, comment down below what videos you want to see from me, and enjoy the video. Now, we're going to start off talking about something I covered briefly in my ultimate itemization guide, which is whether you want to be building, weapon damage, ammo, or fire rate on your heroes. And the answer is always going to be you want to build both, apart from in, certain scenarios like with Haze. But we'll talk about her in a second. But for most heroes, if you're trying to increase your gun damage outgoing, you're going to be building a mix of everything. You're going to want ammo to increase your damage per mag. You're going to want weapon damage to increase your damage per mag and your DPS. And you're also going to want fire rate to increase your DPS. The reason being that the way weapon damage stacks is that it's a separate stat. The percentages will add together additively, and then they will multiply your base weapon damage. Every single percentage you get isn't going to multiply your overall damage, it's just going to multiply your base. So if I buy basic mag here and I get 21% weapon damage, the next purchase I make isn't going to increase my 33 damage to the head by the flat percentage. It's going to add on to the weapon damage bonus percentage, and then they are going to multiply the base. So to make it a little bit easier, we'll get about 50% damage increase here. So I'm doing 41 damage. And then if I wanted to increase my damage a bit more, I could get slowing bullets to get 26% weapon damage, but it's not going to increase my outgoing gun damage by 26%, as you'll see. So I'm getting 41 damage here right now. If it was going to increase it by 26%, that's around a 10 damage increase, 10 or 11. But you'll see I'm only getting around 7 damage. And that's because, like I said, it's going to add all these percentages together and then multiply my base, rather than just multiply my total outgoing damage every single purchase I make. So the best way to increase your damage or your DPS is always going to be having a mix of fire rate, resist shredders, your mag size, and weapon damage, so that you're optimizing the value of the early purchases. So to reinforce my point, let's do some testing. And I know a lot of people have been asking for this. So if you want to get the damage meter, you press F7, HUD, _ damage meter, true. And then next to your cursor here, you're going to get DPS indicator. Every time you shoot, it's going to tell you your DPS. While it's yellow, it's going to count everything that's happening. And while it's white, it's reset. And now it will start calculating the DPS again. So now let's compare DPS between adding some more weapon damage on top, as opposed to adding some fire rate. Turn off no reload, and we'll shoot 19 bullets. Actually, we'll just shoot 10. We have a DPS of 205. So if I was to buy slowing bullets here, giving me a 26% weapon damage increase, our DPS is going to go from 205 to 236. But if we compare that to a similar sort of value or similar cost buy, in Swift Striker, giving us way less weapon damage. It's giving us 16% less weapon damage, but it's giving us 22% fire rate. This is going to increase your DPS way more. 267 DPS, as opposed to slowing bullets, 236. So you can see that by mixing weapon damage and fire rate stats is how you can optimally increase your DPS output. This is extremely important to understand. So now we've got some weapon damage and fire rate, let's talk about the next important way to increase your damage output. And that is looking at the opponent's resistances and how you can shred their resistances. If you wanted to increase your weapon damage here, you'd probably be looking at a tier 3 item. So you're going to be looking at something like Warpstone maybe. We use Warpstone for now as it has no conditional things like point blank or pristine emblem, and it's just a flat weapon damage increase. It's going to give you 34%. It's also an extra slot, so we're going to keep all the value from these, and it's just going to be this on top. So now against a target with no armor, we're going to be dealing around 117 damage, and against a target with armor, 50% I've given him, we're going to be dealing 58. So it's splitting this damage pretty much in half, or it is splitting the damage in half that he's receiving. My point is that since we already have some weapon damage, we already have some fire rate, The best way to go, even if it's more expensive, would not be Warpstone. You'd think 3000 would be better than a 1200 item, but then you actually have Bullet Resist Shredder in the purple section, which only costs 1200 and reduces their bullet resist by 12%, giving 0 melee damage at all. Let's test it right here. We do to the target without armor, 117 damage, but if we sell Warpstone and we get Bullet Resist Shredder, we do 110. So we're only actually getting 6 extra damage from the Warpstone for 1800 more, purely speaking about damage here. The value of this item is going to increase the more armor someone has. So Infernus is going to have 50%. So now with this item, we're going to be dealing 61 to his head for every single shot. But if we swap that out for Warpstone, you'll see Warpstone against the target with armor is now doing less damage. So 61 as opposed to 58. So now a 1200 item is actually going to give us more damage than a pretty high damage 3000 weapon item. Which will bring me on to my point that it's very, very important to understand how resistances work in this game. Or in every game at all. It's a very misunderstood concept. The best way I could explain it is imagine I had bullets that dealt 100 damage on the dot. If a target has 75% bullet resist, they're only going to take 25% of that damage. So they're going to take 25 damage, as 25% of 100 is 25, obviously. If I was to use something like Crippling Headshot, let's say Crippling Headshot reduces their bullet resist by 25%, just to make it easy, they're going to go from 75% bullet resist down to 50% bullet resist. So instead of taking 25 damage, they're going to take 50. So even though I've only reduced his resistances by 25%, he's actually taking 100% more damage. So going into the late game, when enemies get more armor, the best possible way you can increase your outgoing damage to them is by reducing their resistances. So instead of just stacking up damage on items with weapon damage, you want to be looking at resistance shredders. And I'll show this off now by comparing Glass Cannon and Crippling Headshot. So now let's compare Crippling Headshot and Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon looks to be the best possible way to increase your damage, as it just gives you a crazy amount of weapon damage bonus. It gives you 88% base, plus an extra 70% if you get 7 kills with it without dying. So that's obviously an incredible amount of damage. It's 158% weapon damage, which obviously sounds like an insane amount, compared to Crippling Headshot's measly 38% weapon damage. But Crippling Headshot is also going to reduce their bullet resist by 24%. And as we spoke about, bullet resist shredder is obviously going to get better the more armor someone has, because it's going to increase the damage that they take in a more multiplicative way than weapon damage bonus is going to do. Let's take the Infernus with no armor here, and let's shoot him in the head with the Kelvin that has Crippling Headshot. And we're going to be dealing around 148 per shot. Now, if we switch over to the Kelvin that has Glass Cannon, I've actually stacked this up to maximum. This is the max stacks that you can have at this point. So this is best case scenario for a Glass Cannon user. You're going to be dealing 184 a shot, which is a significant amount more than this Kelvin, where you're only dealing 148. However, what you have to remember is that this is the best possible case for Glass Cannon. You have the 7 max stacks, and this target has no armor. So now let's try it against the target that does have armor. Crippling Headshot is going to be doing 88 per shot, and the Glass Cannon with maximum stacks is going to do 92 per shot, which is a very, very, very insignificant amount more. It's 40 more. It's 4 more damage per shot even, but you're also losing 15% max health, and you're also not increasing your damage with Spirit, with your abilities, which is what Crippling Headshot is going to do for you. Increasing damage from both these sources is absolutely massive, and overall, if you're a character that uses abilities, like you're going to use your Nade, you're going to use your Frostbeam, you're going to be doing more damage to most targets, even targets with 30% resistance only, not the 50% that this Infernus has. Not to mention that some targets might have more than 50% bullet resist. But Crippling Headshot is going to increase your outgoing damage more consistently than Glass Cannon will, at the same time as not giving you that horrible negative of minus 15% max health. Another huge point for Crippling Headshot is that it's going to increase the damage that the enemies are taking from all sources, not just you, from your teammates as well. So if you factor in during team fights that you're not going to be the only one shooting someone, Crippling Headshot is far, far, far superior to glass cannon, even in glass cannon's best scenario where the enemy has no armor and you have max stacks, which, let's be honest, is going to be extremely rare. So in my opinion, this is why there is absolutely not a single case in which you should ever buy glass cannon over crippling headshot. The only time that it might be viable is if you are absolutely stomping early game, completely stomping people, and you want to buy glass cannon because you're guaranteed going to get the stacks. But even then, late game, if you don't win early, it's going to fall off. You're going to feel this minus 15% max health. When people start getting armors, you're going to be really, really upset that you don't have crippling headshot instead. And like you saw, crippling headshot is still a huge damage increase to people even without armors. Now, another thing I forgot to mention that I'll quickly cover is that obviously the weapon damage bonus is diminishing as it goes up, right? So the test here is actually favoring glass cannon slightly, as I have a very little investment into weapon damage before I buy glass cannon. If we test it out with a little bit more weapon damage, so if I have point blank, let me get these guys to low health so pristine emblem doesn't actually do much. But if I have point blank, pristine emblem, you know, two very common items that you might have before you buy glass cannon, since they're huge increases in damage on their own, then we'll see the results might change a little bit. So glass cannon to the target with no armor is going to be doing 210 on average per shot to the head. With crippling headshot and this extra weapon damage, we're now dealing 180. So it's made the gap a little bit smaller between glass cannon and crippling headshot. The more weapon damage you have before glass cannon, the more the extra bonus damage you're getting from the item itself is going to fall off, and the more effective crippling headshot's bullet resist reduction is going to come, as it's effectively multiplying the damage you are going to do with all your other items. So if we test it out with the target with resistances, we're now dealing 107, 108 per shot, let's say 107 on average. And with the glass cannon, Kelvin, we're going to be dealing, again, less. We're going to be dealing 105 per shot. Crippling headshot is just going to be better in all cases, pretty much. The only time you're going to do more damage with glass cannon is, again, the best case scenario. You have all stacks, someone has no armor, which is very rare, because the only time that you're going to have a build like this and someone's going to have no armor, they're going to be a squishy anyway, and the damage you'll have from crippling headshot and the damage you already have from the previous items is going to be more than enough to kill a squishy regardless. Your team is going to thank you for having crippling headshot way more than if you had glass cannon, and you're also going to survive a lot longer without glass cannon, as 15% minus max health is a disgustingly bad negative to have on a build. Now, to talk about the same thing, but for spirit damage heroes, again, the way you scale damage on spirit characters is a little bit different. You're going to see your scaling here. So I'm going to get 0.9 DPS every single one spirit that I get on Arctic Beam. So once you get a bit of damage by increasing your spirit, the best way to increase your damage again is with things like Mystic Vulnerability, Crippling Headshot, and other things like that. For instance, 7 can reduce enemies' spirit resistances by minus 15% just by shooting them with Power Surge. So having someone like this on the team when your team's doing a lot of spirit damage is going to buff everyone's damage like crazy. There's nothing close to it. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope the information that I've provided in this video will be useful to you guys. I think resistances is a very widely misunderstood topic, and people think just stack damage on top of damage on top of damage to be able to do the most damage, right? But if you actually look at the numbers and do some testing, you'll see that crippling headshot over something like glass cannon, even crippling headshot over boundless spirit, is going to get you a lot more damage in most cases. Anyway, that's it from me for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.
He was a fairy.